Hello everybody, this is Dragonzilla1991 here, and tonight's review will be a trip of nostalgia, because the subjects of this video will be focused on the Plastoy Miniature Dragons. Now Plastoy is mainly a company that does merchandise for franchises like Tintin and Asterix, but all the way back in 2012, many years ago, they did some tube sets dedicated to dragons, and 2012 was, after all, the year of the dragon in the Chinese calendar, so it makes sense. You guys remember when everyone said that the world was going to end at the end of that year? Yeah, good times. And in my opinion, one of the best years of my life, but I digress. Anyway, these were quite similar to the tube sets by Safari and Collector, but these miniatures were more harder and detailed, and both contained 6 dragons, just like Safari. By the way, I have 2 of Safari's dragon tube sets, and perhaps we'll look at those another time. However, unlike Collector and Safari, where their miniatures are scaled down versions of the larger models, well, these miniatures were their own sculpts, but they were nevertheless inspired by some of their larger counterparts, although not being identical. First, we're going to be taking a look at set 1, of course, and this set contains the more traditional dragons, but still having respected themes. However, these are the most classic of dragons. Our first dragon is the Ice Dragon, and just looking at him, you can tell that he's evolved to occupy cold regions and habitats, such as mountains and the poles. I suspect that this dragon will be a really popular one, because as you can see, in place of scales he possesses fur, or perhaps they're meant to be feathers, designed to keep him warm. After all, if there were avian dinosaurs, then there's bound to be avian dragons too. His facial expression shows him to be smiling, despite the fact that it looks rather crooked, but it's just how it's been sculpted, and he has his tongue stuck out. Also with that facial expression, he does actually remind me of Snow Miser from The Year Without Santa. His left horn appears to be a bit dented. He is standing up bipedally. However, the pose that he's in does kind of remind me of outdated portrayals of dinosaurs by Charles Knight. And if dragons truly existed, if you believe that they were real, then I doubt they would be able to stand up like this. And it's most likely that they would be more streamlined, just like the dinosaurs. So he's either actually a quadruped, but he's raised upright to look more intimidating, or perhaps he's been flying and he's just preparing for landing. However, I still like it, and despite it being a miniature, he's still impressive looking as any other large dragon figure. Up next is this dragon, which is for the most part your traditional dragon, but take another look and you'll be quick to notice that she actually possesses 2 heads. I don't know the genders of these dragons, but it's for variety. How I would describe the colour scheme? Well, I would say that it's like a Cardino resin. I might butcher that. And if the normal purple, then I would say that she bears a striking resemblance to the character Spyro, but with an extra head. A 2-headed organism is an unusual sight indeed. After all, yes, it's been known to happen, but as a birth defect, with twins being fused together. However, for this dragon, it's either a birth defect, or maybe something within the species, but it still makes her unique amongst the rest. Something that I have noticed with this miniature is that the right wing is placed between the horns of the right head, where I believe it should be at the side. Both heads show the mouths to be open to indicate roaring. Well, one head is roaring and the other's isn't as wide, so perhaps it's getting ready to roar, or it could just be hissing. Also, she has the classic arrow point at the end of the tail. I don't know when this figure was being planned. It was intended to have 1 head originally, but it was decided to give it another head to make the dragon stand out, or she was always scheduled to have an extra head from the start. But overall, regardless, I do love the 2-headed dragon, as I feel that she's one of the set's best. Another dragon that I also consider her best is the Lizard Dragon, and out of all dragons out of both sets, this is the only one to date that has made an appearance in a past animation, and that was a small cameo in the Dragon Complex Chapter 1 Origins of an Empire. And this dragon is quite primitive looking, as it could be one of the earliest of dragons to evolve, and he is pretty prehistoric looking in appearance. So I would have labelled him as Prehistoric Dragon. But he does have some features of a lizard. In fact, I think he may be an amalgamation of certain lizards. For example, his main body kind of resembles a Komodo dragon, but bulked up. And I believe I can even see a bit of bearded dragon sprinkled in there too, mainly in the horns. However, I have noticed that the wings appear to be a bit too small, and not to mention that he's a rather bulky looking dragon, so I'm uncertain whether or not they are capable of lifting him off the ground, or maybe they're now a pointless handicap that future generations will devolve and lose over time, or another possibility, for actually a cooling system and will collect heat from the sun, kinda like the sail of Dimetrodon. I don't know if that theory is still going, or it's now outdated. so whatever the case, please let me know in the comments. Even though he is classified as Lizard Dragon, he does actually give me Varatsid/Stem Mammal vibes, because that's what he reminds me of. So maybe this particular dragon might actually be from the Permian period. He could have existed millions of years before the dinosaurs appeared on the Earth, and would have lived alongside them bizarre looking giants, like Gorgonopsids and Scutosaurs, etc. and so on, and may have even witnessed the great dying of 250 million years ago. So yeah, he may be labelled as Lizard Dragon, but I like to call him Permian Dragon. I would refer to him as Prehistoric Dragon, however I don't want to be confused with the actual Prehistoric Dragon from the mockumentary Dragons of Fantasy Made Real, aka The Last Dragon. You know, the more I look at him, he does kind of look like a creature out of a Jim Henson film, well mainly ones outside of the Muppets, like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. The fourth dragon is the classic Chinese dragon, and this particular miniature is actually my all-time favourite out of both sets. I'm not too sure on what it is with this dragon that I like. I'm guessing that it must be the red colour scheme. From what I have heard, some folks do say that they actually prefer Chinese dragons in green. And while yes, I do have to agree that they look really nice in that colour scheme, but I don't know, there's something about these dragons in red that I find very appealing, and I like my Western dragons to be green, even though they do look great in red too. We can tell that this is the Chinese dragon because, as you can see, he has the serpentine body, where Western dragons are more lizard-like. He possesses wavy whiskers that are another iconic feature with these dragons. They are dark gold, even though they do appear to look yellow, but I think they're meant to be gold. And of course there are the horns that resemble deer antlers. Well, at least that's what they look like to me. My favourite part of the miniature is the head, and despite the fact that he is roaring, however, the way it has been designed, he does actually kind of remind me of a Muppet. Scratch that, with the tongue stuck out and those wide eyes, he does actually look more like the Chinese dragon prop from the third season of Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends. The side of his legs have those patterns that look like fire. I'm not sure what they are, but I will say that they only add to the dragon's power. Unlike in Western culture, where the dragon is a beast to be feared, the Chinese dragon is a reptile that is treated like a god, and is said to bring good luck and make the crops healthy. However, if there is misfortune in the land, then these creatures will turn hostile. As mentioned earlier, this miniature is without a doubt my favourite out of both sets, and easily one of the best, not just for set 1, but for all Chinese dragon miniatures in general. Also because 2012 was the year of the dragon, as mentioned at the start, he is just perfectly right. And just take me back to that great year. From a great miniature to a rather upsetting one now, as we have the dead dragon. I don't honestly know why we have a miniature of a dragon corpse, because design-wise, he looks great. It's really hard to say whether or not this dragon was biped or quadruped, because of the way it's been positioned. However, it does kind of bring to mind a kangaroo. It just might be the pose. His tongue is stuck out, and on first sight this may look comical, but from what I have heard, when a dead body begins to rot and decompose, it does become bloated, and the tongue will actually stick out. And although this miniature is flat, but if you look closely, then you'll see that the body is beginning to bloat. And the tail is quite interesting too, because the items on it look like Thagomises, as seen on Stegosaurus. It's a mystery on how this particular dragon met its untimely demise, and I don't see any battle wounds, so I'm guessing it might have died of natural causes. Unlike the past 4 dragons that we looked at so far, this one does feel more like set dressing and something to place in the background. Yeah, this one is clearly the weakest out of the set. The last dragon for set 1 is the dragon skeleton, but this, despite being dead again, is standing upright, so either it's being brought back to life by black magic, or it's set dressing like the dead dragon that we looked at just now. It works either way, but for the record, let's just say that it's been revived. The wings are intact, because the membranes are still preserved, where they should have disintegrated a long time ago. However, there are holes in the wings, so you could say that deterioration is slowly coming in, and the design of the miniature does actually remind me of Godzilla's skeleton. If this dragon has come back to life, then going by the pose, I'm guessing that it's meant to be on the attack. But no matter how much I look at this dragon, it is completely deceased. And where the others I had a lot to say on, the dragon skeleton is just that. A skeleton, and nothing more than a prop. So that's set 1, and now we're going to take a look at set 2. And where the dragons of set 1 were traditional, these particular dragons are more thieves. Starting off this set, which has got to be the cutest miniature, and that is of course the dragon hatchling. Now design wise, this looks more like a griffin, but that's just in the beak. The egg is naturally all smooth, except for the areas where the dragon is breaking out of the egg's end. One of the feet is sticking out, and the baby dragon seems to be screeching out. Maybe it's calling out to its parent. Despite this only being a miniature, and roughly the same size as all the others, this is actually the biggest out of the set, but the size has got to be increased just so that you can see it in all its glory. All you need to do is find a larger dragon figure that has a not identical but fairly similar design to the hatchling. In fact, it could be the adult counterpart. I can only imagine the chirping noises that this dragon is making, or maybe it's making the same squeaks that baby crocodiles make when they call out to their parents. Now we have the sea dragon, and no dragon set would be complete without one. The colour scheme is for the most part dark silver looking like shiny grey, with the fins being dark and light blue. Now when we think of the tales of marine reptiles from prehistory, we tend to picture them with flukes, as that's the modern day reconstructions, and the same would naturally apply to sea dragons too. However, the tail on this miniature, as you can see, bears a striking resemblance to a whale's tail. When reptiles are underwater, they swim from side to side, and again dragons being giant reptiles would do the same, and whales swim with their tails going up and down, like all marine mammals. So I'm actually quite interested on how this dragon functions while underwater. Does he swim from side to side like a reptile or a fish, or up and down like a mammal? Like the Chinese dragon out of set 1, his body is serpentine design, so perhaps this is a relative. And he not only has the features of a fish, but the sides of the body have structures that appear to look like gills, kinda like the 2014 Godzilla. They're close to indicate that this dragon is amphibious, and he has the ability to come onto dry land, and they open up again whenever he's back in the water. Here's a little bit of fun trivia with this particular miniature. He was actually going to be in the Kaiju and Cryptids episode Mission Gorath, playing the lake monster Ogopogo, where he was going to be one of the guests at Pigface's birthday party. However, he wasn't featured because I forgot to place him into the story. In fact, there were a fair few other monsters who were going to make little cameos, but didn't make the cut. I do plan to make audio commentary on the two-part at some point in the future. Sea dragons are so majestic, and it would have been criminal if one wasn't included in either set. Here we have what Plastoy have labelled as Fire Dragon, and I don't think I really need to explain why. As you can tell, this dragon is raging with fury because he is blasting out fire which is erupting from his mouth. Or it's possible they could just be shooting out fireballs, and the back spines are glowing with fire. This does actually remind me of Godzilla, because whenever he blasts out his atomic breath, his dorsal spines also glow, and perhaps this could be a homage to the King of the Monsters. Or maybe they are just regular spines that are fire-shaped, but they do look pretty epic. I love the colour scheme of this miniature, because it looks like when rock breaks up and lava is revealed, and the pole seems to show the dragon swooping down, so perhaps he's in flight, because that's the impression I'm getting from this dragon. Also, looking at his design, he does actually remind me of a theropod dinosaur, well, at least the old classic outdated interpretations, but it could just be the way he's been sculpted. This is also another favourite out of set 2, however he's not the only fire-breathing dragon. By the way, remember earlier when I said that the ice dragon kind of reminds me of Snow Miser? Well, for this particular dragon, he would definitely be Heat Miser. Now we have the classic Western dragon, and the first thing that you'll be quick to notice is that he too is blasting out fire. I just love the design of this dragon, as this is your classic dragon, and even though it looks great in the golden colour scheme, but I do think that he would have been much better in green. However, I will say that despite this dragon being a quadruped and possessing one head, he does actually remind me of King Ghidorah, and the three horns are quite similar to Rodan's crests, well, at least from the Heisei era of the Godzilla series, so I wonder if they're meant to be a homage or a coincidence. Like some of the other dragons out of the two sets, his tail is curved, but I think that might be for storage reasons for when they're in the tubes. This is a very epic looking dragon. Whenever you think of these fire-breathing lizards, this will be the most iconic image to come to mind. And if it weren't for the fire breath, then I would say that he is roaring. Definitely one of the top dogs, or in this case, top dragons out of both sets. From set 2, I'm kind of spoiled on which dragon is my favourite, because it's between the Western dragon and this behemoth, the Giant Dragon, as they've labelled. And this particular dragon, despite being only a miniature, as you can see, is an absolute hulk of a dragon, looking more like a kaiju out of a Japanese movie. His pose is very humanoid-like, as if he is a man in a suit, and standing up bipedally does give me Godzilla vibes. So I wonder if this dragon is meant to be a homage to the King of the Monsters. And if that's the case, then I would have called him Goji Dragon. One thing that I have noticed is that the horns are rather short and stumpy, as if they're baby horns, but I can imagine them being actually larger and more dangerous looking. However, if they were made like that, then they would probably snap off quite easily, so maybe this is for safety reasons. Even though earlier I said that the Western Dragon would look much better in green, but the Giant Dragon is more nicer in this colour scheme, well, any dragon looks good in green, no matter what species they are. In reality, a dragon wouldn't be able to stand upright like Godzilla, and dragons, whether they're biped or quadruped, would most likely be streamlined like dinosaurs, both avian and non-avian, but this miniature, like all the others, is made for entertainment purposes, not educational. Finally is the Dragon Sorcerer, and unlike the others that were animals, this dragon appears to have intelligence, because he is holding a magic staff and a crystal ball, so perhaps he's a dragon that can communicate with speech, and give orders to other dragons, or maybe he is a wise dragon who gives out advice to those who seek out knowledge. The wings are pretty large, to which I would say they would be the dragon equivalent to a wizard's cape, and like some human sorcerers, he has ram horns. However, one thing that I don't like would be the facial expression, because his eyes are kinda googly looking. But to be fair, getting the pupils to look straight, especially on a miniature, is quite challenging, and a lot worse if you have shaky hands. And his tongue is sticking out, but then again he could be tasting the air for any vulnerable morsels. I like the human skull on the staff, as well as the bull horns, all to indicate the magic power of this dragon. You know, this miniature does actually remind me of the Sorcerer Dragons from the McFarlane Dragon series from 2 decades ago, and one I do have in the collection, which is the Series 1 Sorcerer Dragon, so I wonder if they were meant to be the inspiration for this particular miniature, because that's what he reminds me of. And because he's a sorcerer, he could have been responsible for the revival of the dragon skeleton. Except for the facial expression, I really do like the Dragon Sorcerer, as he would be the one that all the other dragons would look up to. And also the Plastoy Dragon miniatures. And my final thoughts? They're both great and recommendable if you're a dragon enthusiast like myself. However, they're really hard to come by on both eBay and Amazon, and I bought the 2 sets from Forbidden Planet many years ago when they were brand new. A shame that they never did a 3rd dragon set, but I guess when it comes to designing dragons, there's so much that you can do, and there are many other dragon miniatures out there in the wilderness that you could put alongside. However, Plastoy did make a set that was dedicated to classical Greek mythology, to which I do have in the collection, and that too is also hard to come by, and it's on my list of figures and sets to review in the future, so perhaps we'll look at that one another day. Now for the rankings from least to best. The rankings of the Plastoy Miniature Dragon tubes are Dead Dragon, Dragon Hatchling, Dragon Skeleton, Dragon Sorcerer, Ice Dragon, Aquatic Sea Dragon, Two-Headed Dragon, Fire Dragon, Giant Dragon, Lizard Dragon, Western Dragon, Chinese Dragon. What do you think of these sets? Do you think you'll be adding them to your collection if you can find them? Or do you have them already? And if so, what are your nostalgic memories? Let's have a discussion in the comments below. This is Dragonzilla 1991 signing out. Take care, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.